Hi, this is Donn Felker. I'm a senior consultant with Magenic. And in this Dimecast, we're going to cover an introduction to the Spark View Engine. The Spark View Engine is an alternate view engine for the ASP.NET MVC framework, as well as the MonoRail MVC framework. Spark allows the HTML to dominate your flow, and what this means is it enables us to insert C#-like code inside of our view, but at the same time have our view maintain an HTML-like form. And we'll see that through the next couple of Dimecasts. Before we can get running with this demo, what we'll need to do is ensure that we have the ASP.NET MVC framework installed or have the binaries local. We'll also need to make sure that we have the Spark View Engine binaries. And you can get these binaries from sparkviewengine.com or from codeplex.com/sparkviewengine. I've already downloaded these binaries and placed them into a simple folder structure as seen below. I have Spark1, which is where my demo is located inside of a trunk folder. I have a lib directory. This is where all my third-party libraries are. ASP.NET MVC, Rhinomox, and Spark. I'm not going to be using Rhinomox. It's just an example to show you this is where other third-party libraries may go. My SRC directory contains my source code. I've already created the solution for this demo and added to create a Spark View Engine MVC example. All we need to do is add a ASP.NET web application. Repeat, ASP.NET web application to the solution. And this is just this simple selection right here. We don't need to add an MVC one. We can just add an ASP.NET web app. And as soon as that's adding, we'll have our web app here. I've already created one called sparkcast.demo.webhost. And I've added a few things here. Now, by default, when you first add this, the only thing you're going to have is your web config and a default.aspx.cs file, along with the ASPX file. I've deleted the CS file and then also changed the contents of the default.aspx file. Inside of this ASPX, you'll just see that it's a placeholder. We'll get into that in a second. Before we can get this up and running, we'll need to add references to the spark.dll and the spark.web.mvc DLL. These are both file references pointing back to our lib directory. I've also added the references to ASP.MVC, which is the web.mvc, the web.routing, and web.abstractions. In order to get this web app to recognize Spark and to perform some configuration options for Spark and MVC, we'll need to add a couple things. In this line, I've added a Spark config section, and this allows us to config Spark to behave how we expect it to. Right now, I'm just setting the compilation to debug equals true. If Spark encounters a compiler error during dynamic view compilation, Spark will spit out the error and let us see exactly what's going on. Without this, we're not going to have too much of a fun time trying to figure out what's going on. We also need to add one other thing down at the bottom inside of the HTTP modules. We need to add the URL routing module. This is ASP.NET MVC's routing module. So we've just added that. Now we can actually start to get ready some code. I've added an application.cs file. And this application.cs file does a couple things for us. What it does is it sets up and it registers view engines, and then also registers routes. So to understand where this is used, I've also added a global.asax file. Inside of its CS class, when the app first starts, we set up a new application, and when the app starts, we register the view engines. Now, by going back into the view engines, we'll see that there's a Spark engine starter. And the Spark Engine Starter just registers the view engine, the Spark View Engine, as the current view engine for ASP.NET MVC. That's all this line does. It sets us up to use Spark. The next line in our global ASAX is to register the routes. We're just setting up a simple route here. To add a controller, an action, and an ID. Really simple using the MVC route handler. That's all it is for our application class. Now we have an application.beginRequest. So when a request comes in, it's going to go through this couple lines of code here. And all we're checking is if they're going to the root of the website or if they're going to /default.aspx, which is where this file is here. We just want to give them the content that's from our home controllers area. And as we saw on a route, that's going to be the index view from that home controller. So now we can actually see these other folders I've set up here. Content, controllers, views. Content is where you're going to set your JS files, CSS files, images. Your controllers is where your controllers are going to be. For example, we have home controller. And we have views. Then we have home, which is going to be our views for our home controller. And then we have layouts and shared. Spark by default looks inside of the shared location for global underscore global.spark. And these are the global includes and global things that we can include for any Spark file. For example, when I'm editing maybe the index.spark, which is the index view, it'll automatically include the systems.collections.generic namespace, the system.web.mbc.html namespace. So now I can access HTML helpers, URL helpers, generic lists, etc. We can also set up global variables inside of here we can use within each Spark view as well. You might be wondering, well, I don't have a file template for global.spark or .spark. How do I add one of these? The best way is just to add a new item and to select maybe a text file or an XML. Actually, it's probably text is the best, is what I usually do. Give it the name test.spark and then add it, and it'll add it as a .spark file. Also be sure to set these as content for your web app, because if you're deploying from this using MS Build or any type of build solution that executes the copy web application, etc., if it's not marked as content, it's not going to get copied over to the destination of your published website location, maybe on your build server or deployment server. On to the next folder here, we have layouts. So we have an application.spark. Spark automatically looks for an application.spark, which is the default layout of the application. So kind of using the name application as a convention, we're able to use this as somewhat like a master page. Basic HTML in this document, and we have one section here that's Spark. We have a use content equals view. This is a content section with the name view. By convention, when it's named view, it's going to return the current view that's getting returned from MVC. So if we were to go to /home/index, that would be returning the index view, which would be this view right here, index.spark. The contents of this rendered index.spark would be shoved right into this area here. So inside of index.spark, we just have something simple, hello Sparky. When this renders, hello Sparky will be placed right inside of here. So now I've kind of broken apart different kinds of pieces, and I can create different content areas and named content areas throughout my application.spark, and we'll get into that in a future Dimecast. As of right now, we should see that this builds, and we're just going to fire it up. What it's going to do is hit the home controller, hit the index view, tell it to return the view. It's going to look for this view right here, and it's actually going to include application.spark because that's the master layout for it, and it's going to include anything from global.spark. So it's going to compile all three of these together and spit out the result. So here's the result. We run it, it's compiling, there we go. If we look, here is hello Sparky from our index.spark here. If we go to application.spark, we'll see we have top. Over here we have top right here. Then we have bottom, and we have bottom. So anything that I place inside of the Spark view, right here, inside of the index view, gets placed right here. Now let's just make a quick change. I don't have to recompile because Spark does dynamic compilation for us. I could put, hello viewer. That being you. Hit F5. There we go. Hello viewer in bold. Pretty simple. As you can see, it's really easy to set up a new Spark application. It takes you under 5 minutes really if you know what you're doing, and that's about it. Until next time.